Prime Minister refuses to stop the fire. He wants Manipur to burn. He allows Manipur to burn. मणिपुर में महीनों से आग लगी हुई है, लोग मारे जा रहे हैं, बलात्कार हो रहा है, बच्चों को मारा जा रहा है। और अगर आपने देखा होगा कल, तो प्रधानमंत्री हंस हंस के बोल रहे थे, मुस्कुरा रहे थे, जोक्स क्रैक कर रहे थे, हंस रहे थे। When we went to the Meitei area, we were categorically told that please ensure, we want you to come, we love you, but please ensure that if there are any cookies in your security detail, they do not come into our area or we will shoot them. When I went into the cookie area, we were told the same thing.
अगर मणिपुर की मैं बात करूं तो नफरत के बीज किसी ने बोए थे तो श्रीमान राहुल गांधी जी के परिवार ने, इनकी पार्टी ने बोए थे।
This is all bogus claim. They never wanted discussion on any issue because they know the performance of Modi government is historically well.
Alright, so Parliament may be over, but the war of words is clearly not over between the Congress Party and the BJP, between the Prime Minister and Rahul Gandhi. So here's what Rahul Gandhi said in his press conference, in a way responding to what the Prime Minister said yesterday. This is what the Prime Minister said, that peace will be restored and that no guilty will be spared. In response today, Rahul Gandhi said the Prime Minister briefly mentioned Manipur. He will not douse the fire. The Prime Minister in his speech yesterday said the opposition never wanted to debate Manipur in the first place. That's why they've been holding up parliamentary proceedings for the better part of the last 3 weeks. Rahul Gandhi, and you heard that soundbite a moment ago, saying that the Prime Minister laughed and joked while he was speaking on Manipur. The PM yesterday in his speech said the opposition is simply interested only in politicizing the Manipur issue and they insulted Bharat Mata. To respond to that, Rahul Gandhi said that Bharat Mata and the very idea of India are being killed in Manipur, something that he said in Parliament in his speech a couple of days ago as well. Also, the Prime Minister saying yesterday that the mother of all evils, the mother of all problems in the Northeast is the Congress Party and its decades-long rule there. And Rahul Gandhi responding to that by saying, why has the army not been deployed to ensure peace in the current standoff that is happening in Manipur? The Prime Minister invoking Nehru and Indira Gandhi and saying that their governments in the past have historically mistreated the governments of the Northeast. But Rahul Gandhi responding to that saying that there are now 2 states in Manipur. It's not one Manipur. There's a Kuki Manipur and there's a Meitei Manipur. And that peace between the Kukis and the Meiteis is elusive. So that is what Rahul Gandhi has claimed today. So at the end of this high-octane debate in Parliament, all these proceedings being held up for the last many weeks, what has been achieved, and more importantly, has the situation in Manipur been assuaged to at least some degree? Let's try and put those questions to our full panel that's joining us tonight. We have Guru Prakash Paswan of the BJP, who's joining us, National Spokesperson, Dr. Ajay Kumar, National Spokesperson of the Congress Party, Bishwajit Deb, Spokesperson of the TMC, is on the broadcast this evening. Arun Anand is Consulting Editor with First Post, and Dr. Thongkholai Haokip is an Assistant Professor with the Center for Study of Law and Governance at JNU. Guru Prakash Paswan, let me start with you first. The charge that Rahul Gandhi has laid at the doorstep of the Prime Minister is that while he spoke for 130 minutes plus, he came to Manipur only after the 90th minute, and he spoke very briefly about Manipur. According to the Congress Party, Manipur is burning and Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, is doing nothing to douse that fire.
Zaka, a very warm good evening to you and all my fellow panelists. What we have to understand here is that the quality of language that was used by the senior leader of the Congress Party, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, is absolutely unacceptable. It's absolutely unwarranted and absolutely not required in a parliamentary discourse of a country. We are a mature democracy. We are the world's largest democracy. We are being watched across the world. The idea of Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata is the national personification of India. I sincerely advise Mr. Rahul Gandhi and his advisors to please see, research and do some reading from Abhindranath Tagore to Rabindranath Tagore, and they'll understand the idea of Bharat Mata. Mr. Rahul Gandhi's allegation that we were holding up the parliament, let me give this clarification which has been put across on multiple occasions. Day 0 of monsoon session, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke on Manipur. Day 1, the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs invited in debate. Day 2, the Honorable Minister for Parliamentary Affairs invited for a debate. Day 3, leader of the BJP in the Rajya Sabha, Piyush Goyal, asked for a debate. We were never running away from a debate. It was the opposition, it was the Congress party who never wanted an honest and actual conversation on Manipur, because they're aware of the issue that the Manipur problem is a legacy issue of a decade-rule Congress government in Manipur and across India. We have to understand the second allegation which Mr. Rahul Gandhi put across, the idea of India. What is the idea of India, sir? Your idea of India is family first. Your idea of India is dynasty first. Your idea of India, there was no space for a tribal woman to reach the highest constitutional office in the country. Your idea of India is sirf main, mera parivar aur koi aur nahi.
So let me ask Dr. Ajay Kumar of the Congress Party. Dr. Ajay Kumar, you know, one thing that the Prime Minister stressed and the BJP is today stressing as well, that you can't look at today's problem in Manipur between the Meiteis and the Kukis in isolation. You have to look at historically how these communities, these states in the northeast were mistreated by successive Congress regimes. The Prime Minister talked about the 1966-67 Indian Air Force bombing of the Mizo people and the Mizo National Front. Can all of those factors be ignored? The way Indira Gandhi's government dismissed state governments in the northeast, the mistreatment of the Sikhs and what happened in the Golden Temple. Can we forget all of these historical contexts that have led to the situation today? That's the question being asked by the Prime Minister and by the BJP. Please respond.
So my BJP colleague, you know, the ability to tell untruths so brazenly is remarkable. Prime Minister spoke on Manipur first day for 37 seconds outside the parliament. The BJP wanted to have a discussion or short discussion on Manipur. That was the dispute. Not Mr. Piyush Goyal speaking and all. Please get your facts. I've been a parliamentarian. The fact is you didn't want a discussion, short discussion on Manipur. And then when the Prime Minister spoke and bored everybody to sleep, his own people to sleep for 2 hours, 17 minutes, he spoke for 3 minutes on Manipur. Look at this lack of sense of shame. And then he cracked jokes on Manipur. He cracked jokes throughout the thing. He didn't have any, you know, sense of remorse, a sense of shame on what has happened to the women of Manipur. What? Please don't come in when I didn't interrupt you, sir, so please don't come in. You know, I don't interrupt, sir, so please follow the basic guidelines. The other issue, so the continue. Hey, can I complete, sir? Either you have the courtesy, or you, because I don't do it, you please have the courtesy.
I was requesting the anchor
okay,
not interrupting
Zaka,
you,
know,
sir.
please
go on.
Yeah, Dr. Kumar, finish your point, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the issue is the continuous lies. Mizoram 1966 was the bravest decision because the Chinese and the Pakistanis were playing with fire to retain the integrity. 1986, Rajiv Gandhi signed the historical accord. So the question is, if please read, that you know they are so short of education in any way. Ved Marwa wrote a brilliant book on the uncivil wars in India. Brilliant book on Northeast. But nobody will read, and that this poor, typical the BJP RSS combines lies after lies after lies. Kalavati was a lie. It was proved again. They will not apologize. The Indian Institute of Mass Communication I set up, Mr. Modi was set up in 2011. You know, the kind of lies they say it so, you know, so coolly. I mean, it's quite. So my fact is.
No, but Dr. Kumar, come to the issue that I asked you. There is a historical context to what is happening in Manipur today, right? Can you afford to ignore that historical context? It's not like the problem between the Kukis and the Meiteis just began 3 months ago. There is a historical context to it. No. Are you conveniently ignoring that and just focusing on the here and now, and therefore, and you're well within your right to do that, you know, pillorying the government for its handling of what happened in Manipur?
No. The first question, the question is, this is like a smoke screen. I will commit riots, but it is historical. The Jewish final solution of Hitler was a previous hatred of European hatred towards Jews, so it landed up in the final solution of 6 million Jews being killed. What kind of nonsense are we peddling on TV channels today? There is not a single cookie in the valley and there is not a single Maiti in the hills. And there are 6,000 arms robbed and 6 lakh bullets missing. And there are 200 people dead and 7,000 houses burnt. And the Prime Minister has not visited. That is the issue. And the question is whether every government faces challenge. What about this whataboutery? Now Nehru, why don't they blame Nehru and before the Mahatma Gandhi
Guru Prakash
also?
Paswan, quick response and then I need to go to the other guests. You're indulging in whataboutery. What has history got to do with what is happening in Manipur today? The situation is on your plate. You have to deal with it. By blaming the Congress party, you're not dealing with the present day situation. Guru Prakash Paswan.
Zaka, absolutely not. Zaka, absolutely not. And I'm sure as a senior journalist, you are aware of the policies and the deployment that has been done in Manipur. The problem is the politicization of violence. The exact problem is the selectivity in your approach. In 2011-2012, 123 days of blockade in Manipur. Will you blame Pakistan and China for that blockade as well? Please go and get a sense of history first. This is your sense of arrogance, the Congress spokesperson commenting on an education of other people. Sir, I don't want any certificate from you. I am a PhD in law. And please think twice before commenting on anyone's education. This is your sheer arrogance. And this is what the Prime Minister said. This is your ghamand. This is your ahankar, which we will see in 2024, which we have seen in 2014.
Bishji Dev of the TMC, I want to broaden the discussion beyond Manipur. Once again. Bishji Dev, I want to ask you, Dr. Kumar, please yield. I need to go to Bishji Dev. Bishji Dev, the issue is that when you bring a no confidence motion, it's not just on one issue. Yes, the context to it, the immediate proximate reason was Manipur, but whether it is opposition leaders' speeches or the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, it laid out basically what his government has done over the last 9 years and what is it that, as he called, the Ghamandiya Gathbandhan is offering. Now, what is it that the India alliance is offering to the people of India? Because A, it is going to be a hark back to coalition politics, and we have seen the ills of coalition politics. And B, more importantly, what the Prime Minister yesterday said, what is bringing you all together? You're coming together not because of love for each other. The CPM and the Trinamool can't see eye to eye in Bengal, but in nationally, in Bengaluru for the India alliance, that's kosher. Similarly, the CPM and the Congress cannot see eye to eye in Kerala. But next week in Mumbai when you meet for the India alliance, that's kosher. Now, how can that be a justifiable arrangement? Because the people are seeing this. You can't fight in one state or fight in two states and then be bum chums nationally.
Well, we will justify it in 2024. Don't worry about that. But coming to the core issue of Manipur, I would like to say that yesterday, the Prime Minister's speech, when we heard, we can see that he wanted to divert the entire issue. His speech was his own publicity. He was publicizing himself and projecting himself for another 5 years. That was what he was exactly doing. He had little care. He had absolutely no care for the people of Manipur who are crying. He had no heart for the people of Manipur who are crying. He had no sympathy towards the people of Manipur. And unfortunately, this is not expected from the Prime Minister. I would just like to ask you that after the Supreme Court has held that there was no law and order situation in Manipur, absolutely failure of the law and order situation in Manipur, why this Biren Singh government had not been sacked? Why the central team had not been sent there? Why 356 has not been imposed? They talk about 356, they talk about 355, they talk about central team in West Bengal. Where is 356 in Manipur?
No, Mr. Dev, you're a well-qualified lawyer. You should be the last person who is an advocate of President's rule in a federal structure. And you are well aware, sir, after the Uttarakhand judgment, by the Supreme Court, there has been no instance of President's rule being imposed to dislodge a government. So let's leave that aside. Your question is valid. Your question is valid as to why the Chief Minister has not been sacked. I think the Home Minister gave an answer in his speech a couple of days back where he said, hear me out, 10 seconds. Hear me out, 10 seconds. The Home Minister said, we have changed the Chief Secretary, we have changed the DGP. We only need to change the Chief Minister if the Chief Minister is not cooperating. In this case, he believes that the Chief Minister is cooperating. Is that not good enough?
It is one of the issues. But I would like to ask you that what the government of India has done to stop this violence. Why the violence has not been stopped? What is the reason behind it?
Sir, they have sent, as they claim, 30,000 central armed paramilitary forces. They have changed the DGP, they have changed the Chief Secretary. They have appointed a special security advisor who has been sent from Delhi. So they 6,500 FIRs. That's the number that's been put out by the state. There is what has been filed. This is what they're saying that they've done to try and bring the situation back to a semblance of normalcy. Mr. Dev.
If they wanted to stop it, they could have stopped it. Our army is efficient enough to stop this violence. But unfortunately, the government of India did not want to stop it.
Okay. So let me ask Arun Anand that. Arun Anand, over 100 people dead. There have been weeks of violence now. And even today, just this past week, there's been violence in some parts of Manipur. You had the very piquant situation of two agencies of law. One, the Manipur police filing a case against the Assam Rifles. And both of them, one reports to the state government, the other reports to the central government. Couldn't this situation, A, have been better handled, and B, more importantly, why is the central government reluctant to either change the chief minister or even deploy the army to bring peace back to Manipur?
I think in the middle of this situation, when there is a conflict situation and it's a pretty sensitive situation, so changing the chief minister, I think won't help. See, one thing you have to accept that there is a historical baggage in terms of the problems which we have been facing in the Northeast, and parties which have ruled earlier in Northeast and at the center. So they have not handled these problems, and the ethnic composition of Northeast is very complex, and most of us tend to see it from typical, the Delhi framework, and that is what has done a lot of harm to states like Manipur. So largely, I believe I have covered governments before. In post 2014, there has been a large focus on Northeast. Yes, in terms of what has happened in Manipur, I think things should have been dealt in a better manner. But people who were interested with dealing with these things, so they have been shunted out. Punishments have been meted out in terms of transfers. New people have been brought in, and the Home Minister has already visited the state. He has tried to bring both Kukis and Metis together. See, the unfortunate part is that because we are in run-up to 2024 elections, so most of the issues, even if they are of national security or even if they are very sensitive issues, they are going to get over-politicized.
Yeah.
Especially because opposition is looking for an opportunity to go hammer and tongs against the government. I'm not saying, of course, opposition has the right, but that is what, and as far as the spokesperson of TMC is concerned, I just want to make one point, a particular point. If you're talking about violence in the state and bringing presidential rule, I think West Bengal, the kind of violence which it has faced post-assembly polls, it is a much fitter case to put in, the presidential rule.
Okay. So let me ask Dr. Haukip. Dr. Haukip, I think I spoke to you a few weeks back, and at that time, this was just the time when the video had come of the two women being paraded naked. Is the situation today in Manipur slightly better than what it was 2 or 3 weeks back? And more importantly, Dr. Haukip, one of the things that the government keeps insisting is that this government, this regime under Mr. Modi has done more for the Northeast, both physical infrastructure-wise and social infrastructure-wise, than any previous government in the last 75 years. Is that enough to assuage the situation in Manipur as it stands today?
Jaga, before I come to your questions, as a proud citizen of this country, let me question, where are we heading? Because yesterday an FIR was filed against me and my friend who edited a book on Anglo-Kuki War, which is a fight against with the colonial rulers 100 years ago to liberate Indians from the clutches of colonial rule. And another, colonel from the Indian Army who also wrote or authored about that war. So there is an anti-national organization called Federation or Howdy, which is constantly engaging against, faithful citizens of this country who try to contribute something for this country. And they are right now filing against a case against people who are contributing to this country. This type of anti-national has to be brought to justice before, I come to the point. Yes, in the last few years, the current regime has contributed, in infrastructure building like the roads, railways, and others. But I think it's a continuation of what the Congress and the previous governments have done in the past 20 years. So infrastructure has, been improved in the last 5 years to 10 years in Meghalaya, in Assam, in Nagaland, and Meghalaya, in Manipur to a certain extent. But this is something that continues on for the last 20 years since the UPA government came into, came to rule this country. And secondly, regarding the comments of the Home Minister that a certain armed groups called Kuki Democratic Front is engaged in this Manipur crisis. I think this is not only gross but also factually wrong because there is no such armed group as Kuki Democratic Front. There is a student organization called Kuki Students Democratic Front, which is purely a student-based organization, and there is no such armed groups in Burma called the Kuki Democratic Front. And the Home Minister should check these facts before commenting or even talking about Manipur and its crisis in the Parliament. And this is contributing to justice, but it only worsened the crisis. The kind of enmity that existed between the two groups. It is only worsening rather than solving the problem.
Okay, so let me ask Guru Prakash Paswan. I think this is the charge the opposition has also been making, that you have made two Manipurs today. There's a Kuki Manipur and there's a Meitei Manipur. No matter what you say that it was a High Court judgment and the judgment came out of nowhere, and it was a judge apparently who was there here heading a vacation bench, or he was transferred there just a few weeks ago. All of that said and done, fact of the matter is that the situation flared up. Either the state government was not competent to hold the situation to a reasonable level, or worse than that, as the opposition is alleging, they were complicit in the situation flaring up. But either ways, the accountability has to be there. And today, without changing the Chief Minister, Guru Prakash Paswan, what the opposition is saying, and large sections of people are also saying, is who are you then holding accountable? Nobody cares about who the DGP is or who the Chief Secretary is. People don't know them. People know the politician, the political face of the state. And by not changing the Chief Minister, either you are endorsing his performance or there is something to hide.
Zaka, I was patiently listening to the respected professor from JNU Center for Law and Governance, and I think he has made a very important point. But Zaka, we have never, in fact, if you look at our statements made on multiple occasions, we have never placed the accusation on the judiciary. We respect judiciary. We respect the independence of judiciary, but we have to accept the fact that the violence initiated after the verdict of the judiciary, that one community should be given ST status. That is out in the open. That is public discourse. Second question, which you rightfully asked, what about the accountability? What have we done? And I was listening to the observations of Mr. Arun Anand as well. This information is in public domain. Minister of State for Home Affairs, Mr. Nityanand Rai, Mr. Ajay Mishra, they were stationed on the ground for more than 29 days. More than 6 rounds of negotiations and conversations have happened between the two disputing groups. Thousands of FIRs have been filed. You have already mentioned that thousands of paramilitary forces, they're already there. So the idea is not to sensationalize. The idea is not to politicize. We have to come together. In a democracy, any solution comes only after conversations, only after discussion. The opposition asked, we said, let's have a discussion. We said, let's have a discussion.
Mr. Deb, please. Some decorum. Please. Mr. Deb, please, I kindly ask you. I'll come to you. Let Guru finish.
And I think Zaka, the sheer hypocrisy and the sheer double standard of the TMC, Trinamool Congress. Have you forgotten? Thousands of people had to migrate to Assam, sir. Panchayat elections, the most important tier of democracy. In Panchayat election, we saw the tandav of violence that was unleashed by the Trinamool Congress. We already remember what tandav of violence we saw on the streets of West Bengal in the name of Khela Hobe.
Okay.
TMC has locus
Dev, 1 second, I'm coming to you. Let me go to Dr. Ajay
TMC
Kumar.
has zero
1
locus
second.
standi to speak on violence. Thousands of people have to migrate to Assam.
And Mr.
You have
Dev,
no
1
right to speak on
second.
this.
Let me pull back from both of them. Dr. Ajay Kumar, I keep coming back to this point. The no confidence motion was an opportunity for
Trinamool Congress
the
has no
opposition
locus standi to
put
speak on
the
this.
Modi government on the mat, not just on the issue of Manipur, that may have been the most proximate reason, but on the whole gamut of issues that you've been attacking this government on. And yet, in Mr. Rahul Gandhi's speech, and he spoke for about 15 odd minutes, he didn't mention anything about price rise or unemployment or any of the things that are the pet themes of the Congress party. Instead, for the first 10 minutes, he spoke about Bharat Jodo, and the next 10 minutes, he spoke essentially about Manipur. Why haven't you held to account the omissions and commissions of this government? This could have been, in fact, the assessment seems to be that Mr. Gandhi's speech in 2018 was far more politically effective than his speech in Parliament this time around.
No, so you need to give me 3 minutes of 2 minutes. That's it. First, I need to answer that I love your concern for federalism and say president's rule, but I would hope you had done those programs for 9 governments which were surreptitiously, after winning an election, BJP through the back door won 9 states, and was that a lovely push to federalism and great constitutional norm that you need to do a program on? If you're so concerned about Article 356 being, the emergency rules, Zaka, that's for you. The second part is the BJP.
Sir, you have suspended more than 50 governments, democratically elected governments.
Okay, I don't interrupt. Why are you
have
so badly
suspended
behaved, sir?
democratically elected governments on
Why are you so badly behaved,
Guru,
Mr.
please.
Guru Prakash?
Let
Dr.
him
Guru
finish.
Prakash?
Let him
Why are you so
अरे
badly behaved? I don't interrupt you. Why do you have this
सरकार को बर्खास्त किया है.
Let me complete.
Yeah.
So
Dr.
badly
Dr.
behaved.
Kumar.
Learn
Dr.
some
Kumar.
अरे
manners, sir.
आपने चुनी
Learn some
सरकार को
manners.
बर्खास्त किया है.
Stick to the
आप
issue,
please,
merits of the
interrupt.
issue,
I
please.
show courtesy. Mr. Guru
Merits
Prakash,
of the
I
issue.
show courtesy.
Please,
So
please.
please extend the same
Dr.
courtesy.
Kumar, Dr.
I don't
Kumar.
interrupt. You will not interrupt me,
Ask your
sir.
party to
merits of
support
the
the
issue,
federalism.
The other issue
मुद्दे
is
पे
when
रखिए,
they,
मुद्दे
hey,
पे
my
रखिए,
friend,
please.
either you have no manners. I'm saying none of you have manners. Let me complete. I don't interrupt. Please have manners. When JDU and TMC were with them, it was a great alliance.
If you speak a lie, I'll expose you here.
When JDU and TMC was with them, it was a great. Hey, yeah, Zaka, can I have a decent
Yes,
discussion?
Dr. Kumar, go
I'm
ahead.
not
We're all
interrupting. I
listening to
didn't interrupt
you,
him.
but
Yeah.
keep it to the merits
Yeah.
of the issue, please. Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
good. Thank you. Okay. No, it is important when you said about alliances. Gamandia alliances is on one side. If we are Gamandia, then they are Gunda, GUNDA. Prime Minister's, his alliance is also a Gunda alliance. If we are Gamandia, then they are Gunda. The third part, which I told you, JDU and TMC were the allies, they were very good with them. Suddenly they think that this alliance is only an alliance for winning power. Look at it. The most important part, the BJP spokesperson says, historical problem, right? And then he says the High Court judgment created a problem. Come on, get your facts in place. High Court judgment created problem, but Congress is responsible. Look at the lack of sincerity on this, in their communication and the truth. Yeah. If the High Court was a problem, then you are incompetent. But then Congress did it earlier. So you decide, was it a High Court problem? Was it a High Court problem? Then you say it is your problem and you created it and you're responsible.
No, Dr. Kumar, you are not answering the question I asked you. I asked you a simple question. Do you think that Mr. Gandhi missed an opportunity to hold the Modi government to account, not just on Manipur, but a whole host of issues that you say that the government has failed on? And he didn't bring any of that up in his speech.
No, the country has seen that this Prime Minister who roams from Seeker to France came to the Parliament finally, though he spoke for 3 minutes. We were speaking on Manipur, we will speak on Mangai, bahut time aayega. Apna time aayega. Mangai par, berozgari par. Don't worry, sir. But we were focused on Manipur because we care for Bharat Mata and we bleed for Bharat Mata, and the daughters of Manipur, whether Maiti or Kuki, are our sisters and our mothers, and they are the Bharat Mata, like Pandit Nehru, not Rabindranath Tagore only, sir. Bharat ek khoj that Bharat Mata is India, the people of India is Bharat Mata.
Guru Paswan.
Please read Nehru.
Guru Paswan, and I'll go to Vishnu Dev. I need to get closing comments.
Great man. Pandit Nehru, great man.
Yeah, Guru Prakash Paswan. And
What
then
about the
Bishwajit Dev,
people
yeah.
of Chhattisgarh? What about the people of Chhattisgarh? What about the women of Rajasthan? You have to answer. You cannot be selective. Your minister, Mr. Shantilal Dhariwal, what did he say about women's security in Rajasthan? Rajasthan मर्दों का प्रदेश है. This is your leader. Your MLA, Divya Madarna said कि मैं यहाँ सुरक्षित नहीं महसूस करती हूँ. You will not speak about Rajasthan. You will not speak about Chhattisgarh, but you will be selective about Manipur. This shows your hypocrisy and double standard, sir. This shows your hypocrisy and double standard. You are now exposed in front of the people of India. You have done a master. You have done a PhD in sensationalizing political violence and taking leverage out of it.
Okay.
Zaka.
One second.
MBBS from Jipma, Pondicherry and MBA, my friend.
Let me ask Bishwajit Dev. Bishwajit Dev, so as I get closing comments from all our panelists, yes, Manipur is, at least from the Parliament point of view and from the no confidence point of view, that is now seemingly done and dusted. The problem for the India alliance is Mr. Modi has painted this as one man versus 25 other parties. The only raison d'etre for you to come together is to dislodge one man. And he's saying that Mazboot Sarkar versus Khichdi Sarkar. That's the choice before the people of India in 2024. How are you going to counter that, Mr. Dev?
Unfortunately, Mr. Modi's Mazboot Sarkar is a total failure since the last 9.5 years. People of India has witnessed a total failure. The government is a total failure in all respect. Come to the price rise, come to the employment issue, come to any issue about the economy, each and every issue, Mr. Modi has miserably failed. So now he is trying to divert the issue of Manipur while speaking inside the house. He could not say that what is the solution he is bringing to solve this particular problem, to solve the issues of Manipur, to solve the problems of the tribals of the Northeast.
No, but Mr. Dev, what about the other issues? What about the issues that the people of India will have to collectively talk about in 2024? Whether it is strong government versus coalition, whether it is single party versus coalition, or whether it is Mazboot Sarkar versus Khichdi Sarkar. Yesterday, what he talked about, on the national security front, carrying out surgical strikes and Balakot strikes and so on, not talking to Pakistan, terror and talks don't go hand in hand. All of these will be issues to the people of India. And the only issue which to some degree may be potent, which you have, is price rise. Yes, fact of the matter is tomato today is above 200 rupees a kilogram. But none of, I didn't hear that in Rahul Gandhi's speech.
I don't agree to that. It is not only price rise. Talk about the employment issue. What about the employment issue? You talk about any issue. You talk about the economy, the situation of the country.
Zara, can I come in?
What did he give us since the last 9.5 years?
Sir, the IMF, forget about what the government is saying. The IMF is saying India will be the fastest growing economy at 6% plus. This is what the IMF is saying.
The IMF is saying, but I can tell you one thing. There is no employment in the country.
Okay.
Even the government offices, even the government sector undertakings, there's no employment.
Okay, I need to give the final word. I need to give the final word to both Arun Anand and to Dr. Howkeep after that. Arun Anand. So it comes back to, when they joined hands in Bangalore and they came up with the name the India Alliance, it seemed like there is some novelty here. It seemed like they have sort of got under the skin of the BJP. But after this parliament session, after the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, the whole event surrounding the no confidence, do you believe that the choice has been presented to the people of India as to what will be there in front of them in 2024? The choice in front of them in 2024. Do you believe that the India Alliance is being, as the Prime Minister said, आप नाम बदल के मतलब वेश बदल के वही काम अगर करेंगे तो people will see through it?
I think people of this country are very intelligent, and they are much more intelligent, if you put together all the politicians. But a common man on the street is much more intelligent, I would say, because that is the reason that we have been able to preserve the democracy wherever we have seen that, whatever has happened in our neighborhood. See, the thing is that they don't have the opposition, the problem is that they don't have a common minimum program. They have inner contradictions. They're fighting, like in Punjab, They have said that there are already cracks in the alliance in Punjab. The Punjab Congress leaders have said that they'll contest all the 13 seats. So the people of India, I think, probably would see this as more of an opportunist alliance, and also the opposition is again walking into a trap which was laid for them in 2013 and 2018. They are targeting Modi, and Modi's credibility is far higher than any of the opposition leader or all the opposition leaders put together. Okay. That is the fact, and that is what the common man on the street feels.
Okay, Dr. Haukip, I'll give you the final word. How do you then resolve this contradiction seemingly that you have this strong government, a government which is 300 plus MPs, a prime minister whose popularity is sky high, and you have this coalition of parties which is coming together with the sole purpose of trying to dislodge him, and yet this Mazboot Sarkar, this strong Sarkar, is doing whatever it can to restore the situation in Manipur, restore the peace in Manipur. But is it happening fast enough? Is the situation on the ground returning to normal fast enough?
Jagat, the conflict in Manipur has been more than 3 months, and it may continue for another month or two unless the government at the center will take some kind of political measures to give solution to these two communities in Manipur, because the divide between these two communities has been so great. The scars left out of all these killings, conflicts, violence, rape, and others, it's too deep. As such, a kind of political solution has to be arrived at so that these two communities could, once again come at peace. Or
what could be a likely political middle ground? What can bring these communities together?
Yeah, that's exactly some kind of accommodation has to be done in terms of politically, because the Hills has been demanding some political autonomy in the form of within the state or without beyond the boundary of the state for the last 45 years, and there's no accommodation of this kind of demands for the last 50 years. So something has to be brought in to to look into the demands of the tribals in this.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story plays out both in Manipur and nationally. I'm convinced. I want to thank all our guests who joined us. I'm convinced that yesterday's events, the way it played out, and the events of the no confidence motion and the various speeches by the opposition leaders and the conclusion by the Prime Minister, it's very clear that the die has been cast for the 2024 battle. These are themes that you will hear going into 2024. You have a strong government, you have a single party government, you have a leader who is taller than anyone else in national politics and has been for a number of years now. And on the other side, you have a coalition that's come together. You could call it opportunistic. You could call it coming together with the sole purpose of dislodging the BJP and the NDA. And as they say, bringing a semblance of democracy and democratic practice back into the country. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the current state of India-US relations. While the long-term bet for both countries seems to be that yes, India is America's long-term partner, there are some niggling issues, particularly when it comes to minority rights, religious freedoms, etc. We'll have two very special guests. Congressman Ro Khanna is leading a delegation of United States congressmen and women who will be here, who are in fact here right now, and they will be taking part in the Independence Day celebrations. And I will also be speaking to noted academic Salavatore Babones on this mismatch between what we hear in the high rhetoric of India-US ties and what is the reality on the ground. That's right on the other side of this quick break.
With LIC's
आज के ही दिन दादरा नगर हवेली का भारतीय संघ में विलय हुआ था और भारतीय संघ एक प्रकार से संपूर्ण राष्ट्र बना था। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज जब मैं ये 3 विधेयक लेकर आया हूं, उस वक्त आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव का समापन हो रहा है और आज़ादी के अमृत काल की शुरुआत होने का समय है। 15 अगस्त से आज़ादी का अमृत महोत्सव समाप्त होगा और 16 अगस्त से आज़ादी की 75 साल से 100 साल की यात्रा की शुरुआत होगी, जो निश्चित रूप से महान भारत की रचना करेगी। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने इस देश के सामने गत 15 अगस्त को लाल किले की प्राचीर से अपना उद्बोधन देते हुए 5 प्रणों को देश की जनता के सामने रखा था। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, ये 5 प्रण में से एक प्रण था कि हम गुलामी की सभी निशानियों को हम समाप्त कर देंगे, हमारे मन से वो बोझ को दूर करेंगे। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज मैं जो 3 विधेयक एक साथ लेकर आया हूं, वो तीनों विधेयक एक प्रकार से मोदी जी ने जो 5 प्रण लिए हैं उसमें से एक प्रण की अनुपालना करने वाले हैं। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, ये तीनों विधेयक दंड विधान प्रक्रिया, क्रिमिनल जस्टिस सिस्टम को बेसिक कानून, इसके लिए मूलभूत कानून ये 3 विधेयकों के अंदर है। एक है इंडियन पिनल कोड जो 1860 में बनाया गया, दूसरा है क्रिमिनल प्रोसीजर कोड जो 1898 में बनाया गया, और तीसरा है इंडियन एविडेंस एक्ट जो 1872 में बनाया गया। 1860, 1898 और 1872 में अंग्रेजों द्वारा बनाए गए, अंग्रेजों की संसद के द्वारा पारित किए गए ये तीनों कानूनों को समाप्त कर आज हम तीनों नए कानून पुरस्कृत करने के लिए मैं आया हूं। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, इंडियन पिनल कोड 1860 की जगह भारतीय न्याय संहिता 2023 अब एस्टैब्लिश होगी। क्रिमिनल प्रोसीजर कोड 1898 की जगह भारतीय नागरिक सुरक्षा संहिता प्रस्तावित होगी, और इंडियन एविडेंस एक्ट 1872 की जगह भारतीय साक्ष्य अधिनियम 2023 प्रस्तावित होगा। यह कानूनों की जो कानून रिपील होंगे इस तीनों विधेयक से, वो कानूनों की आत्मा जो है, वो कानूनों का मध्य बिंदु है कानून बनाने का, वो अंग्रेज शासन को मजबूत करने की दृष्टि से कानून बनाए गए थे। अंग्रेज शासन की रक्षा करने के लिए कानून बनाए गए थे, और उसका उद्देश्य दंड देने का था, न्याय देने का नहीं था। ये दोनों मूलभूत चीजों पर हम परिवर्तन करने जा रहे हैं। ये तीनों कानूनों को रिप्लेस कर इनकी जगह जो 3 नए कानून बनेंगे, उनकी आत्मा होगी भारत के नागरिकों को संविधान प्रदत्त सारे अधिकार जो मिले हैं इसकी सुरक्षा। ये कानूनों का उद्देश्य किसी को दंड देना नहीं होगा, इन कानूनों का उद्देश्य सबको न्याय देना होगा। और न्याय देने की प्रक्रिया में, ये न्याय देने की प्रक्रिया में दंड वही होगा जहां अपराध रोकने का बोध खड़ा करने की जरूरत है, अपराध रोकने के लिए एक प्रकार की भावना खड़ी करने की जरूरत है, वही होगा। और मैं ये तीनों कानूनों को आगे मैं बताता हूं। या उससे आनुषंगिक विषयों को उत्पन्न करने के लिए विधेयक को पुरस्कृत करने की अनुमति दी जाए।
प्रश्न है कि विधेयक को पुरस्कृत करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में हाँ कहें, जो सदस्य विरोध ना कहें। मेरे विचार में निर्णय हाँ वालों के पक्ष में, हाँ वालों के पक्ष में। माननीय मंत्री जी विधेयक, माननीय मंत्री जी कुछ कहना चाहते हैं इस पे?
हाँ। सभापति महोदय, माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, सबसे पहले तो आज 18 साल की उम्र में देश के लिए बलिदान देने वाले महान क्रांतिकारी खुदीराम बोस की पुण्यतिथि है। मैं पूरे सदन के सामने शीश झुकाकर उनको नमन करना चाहता हूं और उनकी स्मृति से
So from a historic state visit by Prime Minister Modi to the United States in June, and yet at the same time, these concerns and complaints from various US government and academic institutions about religious freedoms here in India, let's explore the whole gamut of Indo-US relations, and what a pertinent time and what a pertinent personality to discuss this with than Ro Khanna, who is a United States House of Representatives congressman representing the Democrat Party. He's now leading a congressional delegation here in India and will be watching the Prime Minister's Independence Day speech from the Red Fort. And I believe this will be the first time that a congressional delegation will be watching the Prime Minister's speech on Independence Day live at the venue, that's the Red Fort. So Congressman Ro Khanna is now joining me. Thank you very much, Congressman, for speaking with us. You're coming to India after a long time and for a very special occasion. You're in Mumbai, you'll be coming to Delhi. What are your thoughts at this juncture of the Indo-US ties? How would you see it?
Well, it's a wonderful feeling of pride, of such warmth, of hospitality. It is a historic delegation. We're so excited that we're going to be at the Red Fort with the Prime Minister celebrating India's independence. And for me, it has personal meaning, as my grandfather, as you know, was part of the freedom movement, in jail for many years. And to see that moment is wonderful.
I do want to talk to you about something which is a bit of a thorn in the relationship. While everything seems to be hunky-dory and everybody is praising the India-US relationship, it is the relationship for the future, no doubt. But there is the issue of minority rights and religious freedoms, etc. And you too had made a mention of it just a few days ago before leaving for this visit to India, where you said that this will be one of the issues you will take up in your meetings with your counterparts in the various meetings that you have here in India. Could you lay out the map for us? What is it that you're worried about? What is it that are your concerns? And how does that square up with the reality on the ground? Because the reality seems to be very different.
Well, he was in the United States, and it was a very successful partnership between the United States and India. There is an increasing cooperation on defense. That's why we're here in Mumbai with the Western Naval Command, on technology, on the economy. There is a cultural cooperation. We're excited. We're going to be meeting Amitabh Bachchan and met Anupam Kher, so the popular culture with Hollywood and Bollywood. And of course, ultimately, it has to be rooted in the values of democracy, openness of the press, pluralism, minority rights. But I am very, very bullish on the United States-India partnership. Well, I have always been clear that India and the United States relationship has to be grounded on pluralism. It has to be grounded on minority rights. We have to condemn violence against any religious institutions, and we will continue to speak out for those values.
I do want to talk to you about a decision taken recently by the Biden administration, and that is to ban Chinese tech imports coming into the United States. And the US and China have been going on this almost trade war-ish kind of situation when it comes to high-end electronics, when it comes to semiconductors. Could you explain the rationale behind that decision and what may be in it for India? Because India is hoping to be this +1, the China +1, when it comes to diversifying supply chains for companies around the world.
Well, we have to be prudent. I mean, we invented the semiconductor technology. We can't be giving the advanced design, the advanced tools to China that they could then use that technology to build their navy, to build their military. As it is, China has the leading amount of ships. And so those are prudent export controls to make sure our most sensitive technology doesn't get to China. But I'm very excited about the partnership between the United States and India's defense. We're doing joint military exercises at the Malabar. We're doing joint exercises with the Navy.
I also want to talk to you a little bit about, some of these protests that we are seeing by what we here in India call the Khalistani separatists or the Khalistani elements. We saw one in California, the state you come from, just outside the Indian consulate in San Francisco. These were violent protests. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, India is a sovereign country, and I recognize the sovereignty of India, and I will leave it at that.
I'm sorry I'm sort of pressing on that issue because India is viewing that issue as an attack on sovereignty, as a question mark on India's sovereignty. And I'm curious to know from you, as an elected representative in the US House, what are your views on this kind of separatist ideology?
Well, there's no view and my thing for separatism. I mean, India is a sovereign country. It has been a sovereign country, and we have to recognize that sovereignty. And certainly the United States doesn't recognize any of the separatist movements.
All right, so you're going to be here in Delhi soon. You'll be there at the Red Fort listening to the Prime Minister on Independence Day. What else is your delegation going to be doing in your time here in India?
Well, we're meeting the head of the Western Naval Command. That's really important for the protection on the Arabian Sea, the joint exercises with the military. We're seeing people like Anand Mahindra, the leaders at Reliance. We're seeing leaders at the IIT. And, of course, the highlight, Amitabh Bachchan, who is an icon still around the world. And Anupam Kher, who we had the opportunity to meet yesterday and is helping so many actors.
All right, Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much. A pleasure, as always, speaking with you. And enjoy your time here in India. Thank you. All right, joining me now to discuss about this whole contradiction between how the Western media, Western academic institutions, and also some government-sponsored committees in the West view India, particularly when it comes to minority rights and religious freedoms and the actuality on the ground. Joining me now is Professor Salavatore Babones. He's a professor with the University of Sydney, joining us from Australia. Thank you very much, Professor, for speaking with us. You've seen these various reports from the US committees on religious freedom. You've seen the reports from the Pew Research Center. How do you explain this contradiction between the perception that there seems to be in the Western elite, whether it's in governments, academic institutions, even the Western media, about India's record under Narendra Modi's prime ministership on its treatment of minorities, on religious freedoms, etc. And when you have traveled here in India on a number of occasions in the last year or so, your impressions for how free people in India were to practice, profess, and propagate their religion?
The perception in the West, and certainly the perception in the United States, is that India has serious human rights problems that derive from the ill treatment of its Muslim minority population. And that perception is so strongly held that when a Wall Street Journal reporter was given the chance to ask one question of Mr. Modi at the White House, the question she chose to ask was, what are you going to do about the oppression of Muslims in India? Now, I don't have any impressions that would contradict that. All of my impressions come from the data. I don't want to talk, what is my impression? What did I feel when I visited India? I want to talk about the hard data we have about the status of Muslims in India. And the hard data completely contradict that general impression that comes to us through the US media.
So what explains that? What explains that contradiction, not just in what we see in US government institutions or media or academic institutions versus the reality on the ground?
Look, first, let's go through the data. I mean, we know from one of the best surveys that's ever been conducted, not only in India, but in the entire world, by the Pew Research Center, America's most respected survey research organization. We know that 98% of India's Muslims say they're free to practice their religion in India. 99% say they're free, that they're proud to be Indian. When they list the top 4 problems facing Muslims in India, they say number 1 is employment, number 2 is crime, number 3 is corruption, and they're only offered 4, and the 4th on the list is intercommunal violence. When they're asked, do we face discrimination in India, 24% of Indian Muslims say that Muslims do face discrimination. But that compares to 22% of Hindus who say Hindus face discrimination. Or put differently, that compares to 80% of African Americans, 46% of Hispanic Americans, and 42% of Asian Americans who say they face discrimination in the United States. We have large-scale Muslim in-migration to India. We have virtually no Muslim out-migration from India. In short, all of the data point to the fact that Indian Muslims are a well-adjusted, basically happy and certainly proud community within India. There's nothing there in the charges of an anti-Muslim human rights problem in India. It just doesn't exist.
Is it also because of the fact that, you take the recent examples where there have been ethnic clashes or communal violence flaring up, whether it is in the eastern state of Manipur or whether it is even in Haryana that happened a few weeks ago? Is it because the state has not acted quickly enough, or state players, ministers, prime minister have not come out and spoken quickly enough? Is that also a reason why this perception, which is wrong to begin with, as you say, has been further accentuated?
No, I think it's a clash between perceptions and reality. Our perceptions are driven by the news industry and by NGOs and activists who want to create, for whatever purpose. For the news industry, it's just to get clicks and sell newspapers, but for activists, it's to try to attract funding for an activist agenda. And these international activists are very keen to promote an idea that India is somehow repressing Muslims within the country. Now, we have data that say that's just not true. Now, how is it possible to peddle a narrative that's contrary to the data? Well, it's possible because we selectively look at cases. So, of course, there's been violence in Haryana. There's been violence in many places all over India ever since India has been a country. But that violence is at an extremely low level. I remind people, India's GDP per capita, which is a good indicator of how peaceful a country will be, India's GDP per capita is only marginally higher than that of sub-Saharan Africa. Now, consider how much interethnic violence there is in sub-Saharan Africa. Or put differently, Latin America is about 4 times as rich as India on average. Look how much interethnic conflict there is in Latin America, which has half the population of India. So if you take a country of 1.4 billion people that's relatively poor, there will be incidents. What I want to do as a social scientist, I'm not a journalist, as a social scientist, I want to ask questions like, how common are those incidents? What's the rate of incidents per capita? How many people are being killed per capita? We want that to be 0, but how many people are being killed versus in other comparable countries? I mean, we had the case of a Muslim who was, horrifically, this is, earlier this year in Gujarat, who was tied to a post and lashed by police. Well, that's terrible. How can that happen? Well, in my own country, in the United States, we had the George Floyd incident, which resulted in the entire Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, an incident can happen. What we want to know is, when an incident happens, is it treated properly by the judicial system? Are those who perpetrated it brought to justice? Is the rate of incidents very low? And on all of those sorts of questions, India comes off looking very good.
So you also, in one of the papers that you put out recently, have drawn a comparison to Israel. That's the other country which strategically has been allied with the United States for a number of years, and yet there is a very, very substantial lobby in the media, in the academic institutions, even in the US government that is out to get Israel, as you say. Do you see the same sort of handiwork at play when it comes to India? You've even coined the phrase that anti-Hinduism is the new anti-Semitism. Where did you come up with that comparison from? Explain that.
Anti-Hinduism is the new anti-Semitism, and just like the counterpart for anti-Semitism is respectable anti-Zionism, the counterpart to anti-Hinduism is respectable anti-Hindutva activism. So what we're seeing is many of the literally same organizations that have long been active in anti-Zionist causes, using those as a cover for an implicit anti-Semitism, those same organizations are now using the same tactics, but to attack Hindutva as a narrative, but under a broader rubric of being anti-Hindu. Now, that's not my own personal analysis. That's analysis coming actually from the organizations, the watchdog organizations that watch anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. They've now been popping up reports of a parallel anti-Hinduism, anti-Hindutva. But even as someone who doesn't study that personally, the tactics and the just the presentation with which we see anti-Hindu movements is just strikingly familiar to what we've seen for a long time from anti-Semitic movements.
And a final word, how does India then break out of this narrative? Is it linked to the current dispensation in power, and therefore people have their pre-held opinions about this dispensation? Or how does India sort of break out of this? Because again, you look at all the public events from US government officials. You had Prime Minister Modi at the White House a few weeks ago, and he was literally, and India was literally the toast of town at that time. So how does India then break out of this narrative?
And 65 representatives walked out of the House of Representatives in protest at Mr. Modi's speech. Let's not forget. Look, India breaks out of this narrative by bringing the facts to the table. I had the honor to meet Mr. Modi here in Sydney when he visited Sydney. We had a 15-minute discussion, and all we talked about was data. Because the issue is India needs to get the data out. Now, I want to stress to everyone out there listening in India, this is not a BJP problem. This is an India problem. And in fact, under the previous Congress government, India was already rated one of the worst 5 countries in the world for freedom of religion by the US International Religious Freedom Rankings. That pre-existed before Mr. Modi. Those rankings go all the way back to 2008, 2009, and India has remained in the bottom 5 in the world ever since 2008, 2009. Should a new government come to power in 2024, that new government will face all the same challenges and all the same problems. This is an India problem that India should unite around, not a partisan issue.
All right, Professor Salavatore Babones, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us on Brass Tacks.
Thank you.
बेड़ियों को चुप्पियों को तोड़ के चली हूँ मैं, तेज है मेरी लहर तूफानों से लड़ी हूँ मैं, सांस ले रही थी कब से आज जी रही हूँ मैं, स्थान है मेरा जो उस पे हक से अब खड़ी हूँ मैं, हिंदुस्तान की बेटी हूँ जो चाहूँ पाके रहती हूँ मैं, शक्ति हूँ कर सकती हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ, क्रूरता का शूरता से देती हूँ जवाब मैं, जंग हो या झुंड हो मशाल मेरे हाथ है, विश्व के उजालों में हूँ देश का चिराग मैं, हिंदुस्तान की बेटी हूँ मैं, गर्व उसका रखती हूँ मैं, शक्ति हूँ कर सकती हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ, मैरी हो या साइना, मिताली हो या कल्पना, इन्हीं से लेके प्रेरणा है इनके जैसा बनना, हिजाब पहनूं या चुनर है कम कहाँ मेरा हुनर, हिंदुस्तान की बेटी हूँ मैं, शान से ये कहती हूँ मैं, शक्ति हूँ कर सकती हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ, तीर भी चलाती हूँ उड़ाती हूँ रफेल भी, उड़ा दे सबके होश ऐसे खेलती हूँ खेल भी, परवाज ले चुकी हूँ मैं ना अब है मुड़ के देखना, हिंदुस्तान की बेटी हूँ आजाद हो के रहती हूँ मैं, शक्ति हूँ कर सकती हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ, हाँ मैं शक्ति हूँ।
Hello and welcome to Vantage. Our lead story tonight is from Eastern Europe. Not Ukraine though, it's from Poland. The country has moved 10,000 soldiers to its border with Belarus. The government is preparing for the worst. On the other side of the border, there are military drills. Russia's biggest ally, Belarus, is holding them. The same old fear has emerged again. Will the Ukraine war spill over into Poland? Or is Warsaw reading too much into this? We will tell you. Also on the show, the Quad countries have kicked off the Malabar exercise, this time in Australia. How will China react to this show of unity? In West Africa, war is looming. ECOWAS countries have activated their standby forces. Could they launch an attack on Niger? We'll tell you why this decision is important. And space tourism is taking off. Virgin Galactic launched its second commercial flight yesterday. How are millionaire space tourists affecting the rest of us on Earth? We'll discuss all this and more. The headlines first. Zelensky fires heads of military enlistment in all Ukrainian regions. Citing corruption allegation, he says the charges could amount to treason. Kiev has been clamping down on graft as part of reforms asked for by the West. At least 20 Syrian soldiers killed in a deadly attack. Gunmen ambush a bus carrying the soldiers in the country's east. The ISIS was reportedly behind Thursday night's attack. These attacks by ISIS sleeper cells continue despite the terror outfit being defeated in Syria in 2019. India will scrap the controversial sedition law. Union Home Minister Amit Shah has made the announcement in Parliament. The Modi government is overhauling India's colonial-era criminal laws. They also plan to introduce capital punishment in mob lynching cases. Global demand for oil soars. In June, it hit a record high of 103 million barrels per day. The International Energy Agency says it will go even higher in August. China accounts for 70% of the growth. The surge in demand for oil threatens to push prices up further. Russia launches its first probe to the moon in almost 50 years. The mission aims to boost its long-struggling space sector. Sanctions against Russia over its Ukraine invasion have also impacted the sector. The Luna 25 probe is Moscow's first lunar mission since 1976. And will India get a web browser of its own? The government has launched a contest to build a homegrown web browser. Cash prize of over $400,000 announced for developers. The browser must comply with Indian regulations on data sovereignty. Poland is preparing for the worst. They have deployed 10,000 soldiers to the border. This one with Belarus. There has been talk of the Ukraine war spilling over, of other countries being dragged in. Looks like Poland is not taking any chances. 10,000 soldiers is a lot. It is not a half measure. It is a strong signal of intent. But what are these deployments aimed at? 4,000 soldiers will support the border guard, basically man the fences. The remaining 6,000 will be held in reserve. They will be called into action if necessary. Poland says the idea is to scare away the aggressor. Listen in.
We have to be ready for any scenario on the Poland-Belarus border. We do not exclude any, and that is why we decided to move the army closer to the border with Belarus to strengthen the border, to scare away the aggressor. That's what we mean, to scare away the aggressor so that the aggressor does not dare to attack Poland.
So how serious is the threat? Talk of a war spilling over began in the month of July. That's when Wagner mercenaries began settling in Belarus. Poland says it's all a ruse, that Wagner could use Belarus as a staging ground to attack them. How has Belarus responded? Well, their president Lukashenko did joke about Wagner going to Poland, but officially they have rejected such claims. There is a history of bad blood between these two countries, Poland and Belarus. And the border is a key part of it. It is around 400 kilometers long. Poland says Belarus is weaponizing this border. How is that? By waging a hybrid war. Warsaw has accused Belarus of pushing illegal migrants into their country. Around 19,000 people tried to cross the border this year. 16,000 people tried the same last year. In July, Poland's Prime Minister floated a theory. He said Wagner fighters could pose as migrants and enter their country, which is certainly possible, but so far there is no evidence that it's happening. The only escalation came on August the 1st. Poland accused 2 Belarusian helicopters of entering their territory. Reports say they flew 2 kilometers into Poland. Again, no evidence. Belarus has dismissed the claim as a lie. So what exactly is happening here? Could Belarus actually be plotting an attack? If they are, they must have Russia's support. After all, Poland is a NATO ally. Belarus would not risk attacking them without Putin's green signal. Even then, it is unlikely. Russia is not making much progress in Ukraine, so why open a second front to the north? And that too against a NATO country. There are 2 theories that could explain this escalation, this war of words. Number 1, Russia and Belarus are testing NATO. Maybe they're trying to gauge the alliance's defense, hence the Wagner threat and the minor chopper incursion. And number 2, Poland is making a big deal out of nothing. They have elections in October this year. Inflation is in double digits, was rather in double digits last month. So maybe this is all a populist stunt, an attempt to rally the voters behind a security threat. The fact is we can't be sure. And Poland is not the only country talking about hybrid warfare. Latvia is doing the same. They have beefed up security along the border with Belarus. Their president visited the region this week. He asked NATO and Europe to take hybrid warfare seriously. Listen to this now.
Our friends and allies in NATO and the European Union need to understand that in hybrid warfare, the least possible scenario could be the kind of classic military operations. I think hybrid operations are the most likely scenarios that we have to count on.
The situation is tense right now. Belarus is conducting a military drill near its border with Poland. On the other side, there are more than 10,000 Polish soldiers. So the risk is obvious. Even Russia is planning new deployments. Their defense minister talked about quote-unquote new threats near the western border. He says an adequate response will be given.
Threats to Russia's military security require a timely and adequate response. We will discuss the necessary measures to neutralize them at the meeting and make appropriate decisions.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the war is escalating. Russia has increased attacks in the northeast. So Kiev has ordered an evacuation. People from 37 settlements have been asked to leave. It is not a choice. It is a mandatory evacuation. Another flashpoint is Zaporizhia. Take a look at these pictures from there. Dozens of buildings have been razed to the ground. Those standing are deserted. It's like a ghost town of destroyed buildings. But Kiev is not giving up. They could soon have a new weapons package. Joe Biden has asked the U.S. Congress for more money. How much more money? Around $24 billion. The U.S. has already given aid worth $113 billion since the war began. $113 billion already given. It could soon be $137 billion. So that's where things stand. Fears of a spillover, large-scale evacuations, and more multi-billion-dollar weapons packages. It's like nothing has changed since February 2022. So Europe is keeping its guard up. Asia too is strengthening its defenses against a common foe, and that is China. Navies of Quad nations started a drill today. It's called the Malabar exercise. In the past, India has hosted this exercise. They used to happen in the Indian Ocean. But this year, there is a different host, and that host is Australia. The drills are happening off the coast of Sydney. All 4 Quad members are represented here. Australia, India, Japan, and the United States of America. All 4 of them are present. For the next 10 days, they'll engage in high-end warfare training. Submarines and aircrafts are involved. What is the purpose of these drills? The hosts say they'll improve interoperability.
Exercise Malabar reinforces our shared commitment to working together as partners in our region to ensure that we maintain a stable, prosperous and resilient region for us all to enjoy.
None of the Quad members name China, but that's how the Quad operates. The official line is that the alliance is not against anyone and that the engagements are driven by mutual interests. But Beijing doesn't see it that way. They routinely criticize the Quad, even call it the Asian NATO. Don't expect a different reaction to this drill. The Malabar exercise is growing in size, scope and complexity. It started some 30 years ago. In 1992, it was just a bilateral exercise between India and the United States. In 1998, there was a brief pause. That's when America sanctioned India for its nuclear tests. The drills resumed in the year 2001 after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center in the US. 6 years later, in 2007, we witnessed Australia's entry. But Canberra withdrew a year later. This was after China's relentless opposition. The next few years were stagnant. But in the last 8 years, we've seen significant expansion. First, with Japan's entry in 2015, and then with Australia's return in 2020. Malabar is now a quadrilateral exercise. The expansion widened the scope of drills. They have moved beyond the Indian Ocean. So far, this exercise has been held in the Philippine Sea, in the East China Sea, and this year in the Pacific. The hosting duties rotate every year. Last year, Japan hosted the Quad Summit, so they took care of the Malabar exercise too. This year's summit was supposed to happen in Australia, but Joe Biden called it off at the last minute. So the summit was called off, but the Quad leaders met in Japan on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Now, the Malabar exercise is happening in Australia as per schedule. Its scope will continue to broaden. The Indo-Pacific is getting more attention. There is expanding military coordination. The Quad might still avoid calling out China directly, but it's no longer hesitant in holding drills where the PLA wants a foothold. The Malabar exercise will help in boosting regional security. The drills in Australia follow the events of March. That's when the leaders of AUKUS met. AUKUS, as you know, stands for Australia, the UK and the US. It's a defense partnership. They came together for a submarine deal. The US and the UK will provide Australia with nuclear subs. But just like the Malabar exercise, the AUKUS too is expanding in its scope. Earlier this year, they announced a new initiative, a new trilateral submarine posture. The US and the UK will send their submarines to Australia, and these will be rotational deployments. They'll start from 2027. Where will they be stationed? on Australia's west coast, which faces the Indian Ocean. Diplomatic efforts are also gaining ground. American diplomats are returning to the Maldives, for instance. The US has decided to reopen its embassy there. It was closed in 2008. Earlier, the American mission in Colombo managed the workload. Now there will be a separate mission with a dedicated ambassador. Another Quad partner is also stepping up, and that's Japan. Recently, Japan's foreign minister was in India. He made stops in India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Again, the Indo-Pacific was on his agenda. So how should New Delhi see these developments? If you connect all the dots, you'll see a big positive. The allies are coming closer. They're creating new synergies. India is already making a wider outreach to the Pacific. 2 Indian warships are taking part in the Malabar exercise. Before they reached Australia, they made a port call in Papua New Guinea. We have discussed this in the past as well, the need for an effective deterrence against China. It might finally be shaping up. So countries are racing to contain China, and a new one has joined that list. I'm talking about New Zealand. They're heading to polls on the 14th of October, and for the first time, the electoral spotlight is on foreign policy in New Zealand. Parties are wrestling with how to respond to an assertive China. And now, an intelligence report has accused Beijing of foreign interference. New Zealand has long depended on its geographical isolation. It was seen as a security guarantee, but that's no longer the case. Auckland knows it needs to counter China. And now it's looking at new ways to do that. Our next report tells you more.
The world is a grand geopolitical chessboard where world powers jostle for dominance. But nestled far away in New Zealand, a masterclass in geographical isolation. For long, New Zealand thought its remoteness was enough. It was enough to protect it from anything. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. As tensions rise in the Pacific, especially with the belligerent China, New Zealand can no longer depend on its remoteness. An intelligence report says just that. It has accused China of foreign interference. It says, and I quote, "There were foreign intelligence agencies who persistently and opportunistically conducted espionage operations against New Zealand." The report calls for greater awareness. With the general election on October 14th, there is no clear path on how the country should respond. External issues are uncommon in New Zealand politics. But this time, the spotlight is on foreign and defense policy. Surveys show public concern around security. 40% of respondents saw China's rise as one of the greatest threats to New Zealand's safety. So, parties are grappling with how to deal with China. New Zealand has long been friendly with Beijing. Last month, the New Zealand Prime Minister was in China. The week-long visit was aimed at boosting exports. New Zealand's dairy and meat export economy is very reliant on Beijing. While the West may rally against China, New Zealand has historically taken a conciliatory approach. Last year, it even upgraded its free trade pact with Beijing. But China's muscular presence in the Pacific has raised a few eyebrows in New Zealand. So has its decision to sign a security pact with the Solomon Islands. This is a move that drew sharp rebuke from New Zealand. So now, Wellington must decide how to approach defense spending, its relationship with the United States and China, and the AUKUS partnership. Currently, New Zealand's defense budget is about 1% of GDP. The governing Labour Party says spending must increase, but it hasn't said by how much. Its involvement in a second tier of the AUKUS is also unclear. The AUKUS partnership involves the UK, the US and Australia. They're collaborating on nuclear-powered submarines. New Zealand's Defence Review says it presented an opportunity, but it does not want to compromise its anti-nuclear position. New Zealand goes to polls on October 14th. Chances are that the Labour will lose and the opposition National Party will win. So what's their China policy? The National Party has highlighted the importance of ties with China, no matter how contentious they may be. As for defence policy, they say they need more details on AUKUS. New Zealand manages its China relationship very carefully. On one side is its security partnerships in the West, and on the other, its economic dependence on China. So it's unlikely that New Zealand will get caught in a West versus China rivalry. But its balancing act is getting harder to maintain.
Vantage continues after a short break.
होकर युगों युगों के लिए जो युवा देश के लिए काम करेंगे वो सब के लिए महान क्रांतिकारी खुदीराम बोस जी का जीवन प्रेरणा के स्रोत हमेशा के लिए रहेगा, इसका मुझे विश्वास है। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज का ऐतिहासिक दिवस है। आज के ही दिन दादरा नगर हवेली का भारतीय संघ में विलय हुआ था और भारतीय संघ एक प्रकार से संपूर्ण राष्ट्र बना था। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज जब मैं ये 3 विधेयक लेकर आया हूं, उस वक्त आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव का समापन हो रहा है और आज़ादी के अमृत काल की शुरुआत होने का समय है। 15 अगस्त से आज़ादी का अमृत महोत्सव समाप्त होगा और 16 अगस्त से आज़ादी की 75 साल से 100 साल की यात्रा की शुरुआत होगी, जो निश्चित रूप से महान भारत की रचना करेगी। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने इस देश के सामने
So China is losing friends, it is also losing money. Deng Xiaoping had once said, "To get rich is glorious." China enjoyed its riches for a few decades, but now it is seeing the other side. China's